So it's back in 2015 and I'm standing in the office of my Spanish teacher. Basically, I'm talking to him and he's accused me of cheating on this essay assignment that we had recently. So basically, last year in 2014, I was the worst student in Spanish class. I literally got the worst grades. I could speak Spanish the worst. I was terrible. But over the summer holiday, I discovered Duolingo. And basically, I fell in love with Duolingo. I got addicted to it. I was like spending hours a day studying Spanish. And I was doing Duolingo and I was always also doing other things like YouTube and like other ways to learn Spanish. Basically, over the summer holiday, I fell in love with learning Spanish. And so I made a ton of progress. Literally like 4 to 6 hours a day learning Spanish. I made a ton of progress. And we got an assignment. After the summer, we got an assignment. And I did so well on it. Like I was using super advanced grammar, like the subjunctive tense and other stuff, that basically my teacher accused me of cheating. Because last year I was the worst student, and now I had written this essay that was like perfectly written in Spanish. And I told him my story and I said like how I fell in love with learning Spanish and it was legit. And I proved to him that I could like understand what I'd written. And so he believed me. But basically I blew his mind. He had never seen this much progress in anyone. And basically like he was so proud of me that he kept talking about me to all his classes. And so like I would be like at lunch and kids would be like approaching me because they would be like, "Hey, I heard about you. You're that guy who's really good at Spanish, right?" And so like I kind of became like a celebrity around like the language learning, the Spanish. Kids and like young kids like approaching me saying they knew me because the teacher was talking about me. And I was always that like shy, awkward kid who no one respected. So this was like the first level of like respect and clout that I was like getting in my life. So I guess that was part of the reason why I became obsessed with learning languages, because it gave me like a sense of clout, like respect from other people. But I also just loved learning the language. Like I took it to the extreme, bro. Like I had a notebook. Like you know how in class you get a notebook and you have to write down your homework and stuff? I literally filled that entire book, like every spare white space on that book, with like a new word that I was learning. It got to the point where this like thick book, this entire book, every single like empty space was filled with like a Spanish word. And people would open the book and they'd be like, "Bro, what the hell is this?" Because it was just filled with like words and stuff. Or like I would do this weird thing where like I did this thing for a while where I had like audio constantly playing on my phone. And I would like have an earbud that I would like put into my ears. So I'd just be constantly getting input from the language. And people would be like, "Yo, you listening to music?" And they'd like listen to the thing. It would just be like a random like Spanish podcast. And they'd be like, "What the hell, bro?" like I'd find it hilarious to just say random like Russian phrases or random like Spanish phrases or whatever. It was like what I was thinking about for most of the day in high school. So for the next year, I was like studying Spanish really, really intensely. Every day, like literally, bro, on the bus on the way to school, I'd be studying Spanish. Taking a shit, I'd be studying Spanish. I'd be listening to Spanish, in the shower. So I became obsessed. I fell in love with it. And so yeah, I learned Spanish from 2015 to 2016. I kept learning Spanish because I was also doing it in class. I did it for something called the IB program. I don't know if you know what that is. But I also learned other languages. After I learned Spanish, I started learning Portuguese. Fell in love with that, fell in love with like Brazilian culture and got really obsessed with Portuguese. And also learned Italian. So I was doing like these Romance languages. And in high school, I also learned Russian. And after high school, I spent a couple years studying Chinese. So those are the languages I learned. Because I think it is a 10 out of 10 hobby. Now this was like before I discovered self-improvement, before I got obsessed with like, improving my mental health, my social skills, my fitness and all that. So these days I don't learn languages as much as I used to, but I still do quite like learning languages. Like recently I've been reading, here it is, Harry Potter in Spanish, reading Harry Potter for the first time. But this is why I love learning languages, bro, because you don't have to like stick to one curriculum. Like when you're learning like maths or physics, for example, you're kind of forced to like learn from one textbook. You're kind of forced to follow one path. But when you're learning a language, you can kind of do whatever you like. Like to learn Spanish, I used music, I used books, I used YouTube, I talked to people. Like if you know anything about language learning theory by like Stephen Krashen and those guys, they tell you that the way to learn languages is through input, like reading, listening, all that. So as long as you're reading something or listening to something in the language, you're learning it. So like I would listen to a ton of podcasts, a ton of music, all that. Basically, when you're learning a language, you can follow your own interests. I was that kid who listened to like such weird music because I was listening to like Russian music and like random Italian music and stuff. So I became like obsessed with it. It's such a good hobby. Yeah, so you can follow your own interests as long as you're getting input, you're learning the language, and it's actually applicable. Like, I live in Australia. I still hear Spanish spoken day to day, just on the street. You can, like, it's crazy when someone speaks a foreign language and you can actually understand it. You're like, holy cow, it feels like, I've put in the work and I can actually understand this person speaking a foreign language. It's a crazy feeling. Or when I'm walking and I see like a sign in Chinese and I can understand it. It's like an amazing feeling when you feel like your work has paid off. It's literally delayed gratification. You just feel so proud of yourself when you can understand or hear something in the foreign language. Like when I read Harry Potter in Spanish, right? Like I get into a flow state. Like I understand it well enough that I'm not actually like thinking about what the words mean. I'm just like so absorbed in the story. And it's such a crazy experience where it's like, damn, I've actually like learned this language myself. And I'm just understanding a book. Like I'm literally reading it for the experience. Yeah, and learning about different cultures, it actually like shifts your way of thinking and that you don't realize. Like you probably grew up in one country, you're probably living in that one country, right? So basically what a culture is, it's like a set of beliefs, right? I don't know if that makes sense. But when you live in one culture, you have like one way of living. And that's all you know. You just know this one way of living. But when you start interacting with people who have never been to the Western world, when you start learning about a culture that's so different from the Western world, like Chinese or even like South America or something that's not that far away, you start realizing that people can live differently. Like people have completely different ways of looking at the world, different ways of experiencing the same world. And no one's right. Like we feel like we're right. We feel like the Western world, like, yeah, this is how you are meant to live life, bro. You're meant to, be interested in these things, eat these things, etc. But you realize that there are so many different ways to live life and that your way of thinking, your way of experiencing the world is not the only way. So when you learn other languages, it like opens your mind to different ways of thinking, different ways people experience the world. When you see Latin American people talk to each other, they express themselves very differently. Like they express themselves more openly, they're more like touching and stuff like that. So people literally talk to each other differently. They have like different personalities. So when you like interact with people from those countries, it's like you learn so much. Your perspective of the world completely shifts. And another reason I love language learning, I don't want to say it's easy, but it kind of is. It's kind of easy and relaxing. Like when I read this book, Harry Potter, I just get absorbed into the story. Or when I like listen to music in Spanish, I just get absorbed into the music. But my brain is learning in the background. If you learn about language learning theory, like I said, the theory of language learning, you realize that you learn just by getting inputs. And so you're actually learning. But it doesn't feel like learning. It doesn't feel like you're studying maths or something. It feels like you're being absorbed into the culture, you're being immersed. Like I'm sure you've heard many stories of people who like go abroad and they learn the language just by being immersed in the culture. Learning language, it activates a different part of your brain to learning other things. Our brains are designed to learn languages. So you can literally learn languages by immersing yourself in the culture. But bro, most people learn languages wrong. They learn languages by like studying grammar and vocabulary. But if you learn about language learning theory, like the input hypothesis, you realize that this is actually a really inefficient way to learn languages. And that the best way is to actually like listen to stories and get inputs and immerse yourself in stuff that you actually enjoy. So in a way, language learning is pretty easy. Like, I learn languages, I read these books before bed. Or when I'm in the gym, I listen to music in Spanish or music in Chinese. So I'm learning languages in a very simple and easy way. You can very easily fit it into your routine. Like these periods of your time where you're not really doing much, you can put language learning in there. So it's actually a very easy thing to do, and it's really rewarding. Yeah, and that's another thing. Language learning is really rewarding. Like in the beginning stages, the words you're learning are so common that you learn them really, really fast. So like, you know how in the gym, when you're a beginner for like the first year or two, you make gains pretty fast, right? Like newbie gains, right? Same thing with language learning. There is insane newbie gains. So the beginning stage, you're actually learning really, really fast. And it's so rewarding when you see a word in the wild and you recognize it. You're like, holy cow, I learned this a couple days ago, I recognize this word. Bueno, te puedo hablar un poco en español para que sepas que yo sí he aprendido el español. Bueno, mi español no es perfecto, pero es el idioma que a mí más me gusta. Porque probablemente porque es el idioma que yo hablo mejor, el mejor, así que puedo expresarme mejor en español que en otros idiomas. Por ejemplo, uno de mis idiomas nativos es indonesiano, pero creo que puedo hablar el español mejor que el indonesiano. Así que prefiero hablar en español. Y bueno, me gusta mucho la cultura de Latinoamérica y todo eso. Y bueno, espero que hayas gustado. Espero que a ti te ha gustado este video. Y suscríbete. Gracias. Subscribe if you enjoyed. See you later.